here we go. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Sukah Daf Yud Dalid. We left off on Daf Yud Dalid, Amud Aleph, 5 lines into the wide lines. We're going to be concluding the sugya that machshava, that a new intention, einoi moitzi midei machshava, does not have the power to negate the halachic status that was brought about also from a prior intent. Very interestingly, the Gemara is going to reintroduce a Mishnah by using the words gufa, and we're going to learn today a beautiful Rashi that records a question and answer that Rashi had with his teacher, pointing out that it is highly uncommon that the Gemara should use the word gufa. Gufa means in the body of the text of above. Normally, the word gufa is used in the Gemara when we are quoting a conversation that we had prior between Amoraim. It's really very rare that we use the word gufa to reintroduce a Mishnah, and Rashi is going to explain what he heard from his teacher as to why we do have such an exception over here. But that's going to be just in the beginning of today's daf. We're going to learn the Mishnah on Daf Yud Dalid that will introduce a new case of schach that meets the criteria. Kosher, it's kosher on a biblical level, but it will become invalid midrabanan. And the whole topic of today is going to be regarding covering a sukkah with boards. And we're going to have a machlokes between Rabbi Meir. Boards are not connected to the ground now. They are gedulei min haaretz. They grew from the ground. They are not mekabel tamei, because as we learned, flat woodware, wood without a receptacle, is not susceptible to becoming tamei. So it fits the rules. Thus, it is kosher midoiraisa, but midrabanan, and we'll see why it is invalid. And the complexity of today's daf will be like this: there's going to be a machlokes in the Mishnah between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. And then we're going to have in the Gemara a machlokes Amoraim, a machlokes between Rav and Shmuel, how to qualify where to apply the machlokes between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. Towards the end of Daf Yud Dalid Amud Beis, we're going to have the following topic, and that will be that whatever the limit of the board that we invalidate rabbinically, whatever the width is, if you have such a board, but instead of placing it flat, thus midrabanan invalidating the sukkah because it's not valid schach, what's going to happen if you take that board and you lay it on its side with the presumption that the thickness of this schach is much, much smaller, much narrower than the width? So laying it on the side will bring it back to under the problematic width. We will see another machlokes amoraim, whether that is a solution, whether that will be okay, or whether actually, as we learn in halacha, whether it will not be okay, and much, much more. So again, let us start on Daf Yud Dalid Amud Aleph. We are 5 lines into the wide lines. What we were learning before was about the dinim of yadois, of a handle, that when something is viewed halachically as a handle to food, it becomes a conduit as far as halachas of tuma are concerned. For example, when you have straw and you have a kernel, so the straw is viewed as a yad to the kernel. However, we learned in the Mishnah, gufa, this is quoting the Mishnah we just had above from Masechtas Uktzin, that kol yadoi soichalan, that if you begin with those parts of the wheat, with those parts that were already classified as yadois, but they are now on the threshing floor. And now shebisasan, once they broke open, well, again, we'll see what that word means. That's what we had before machlokes bagoiden on the threshing floor. So now they're no longer viewed as a yad. They're not a conduit. They're not food anymore, and therefore they are tahoidos. They are no longer susceptible to becoming tamei, nor are they able to convey the tuma to the kernels. However, Rabbi Yosi holds that even after bisasan, nevertheless mitame, they still have the status of a yad, and therefore they are a conduit, and they themselves also become tamei. Now, before we read the meaning, the machlokes amoraim that we quoted previously, what does bisasan mean? Is it just an intent? Is it actually a maisa? So let's kedai to read Rashi, 4 lines under the Gemara. In middle of a Rashi writes that Sha'alti esmoiri, I asked my teacher, Migufa the Mishnah the Maisi. Agav Gerara b'Shmaitzin, that the Gemara now is re-quoting a Mishnah that we learned above. Mi shayach lemisnei gufa. Do you begin that reintroduction using the words we learned in the body of above, gufa, kidigar sinan, as which is the word that's normally in the text, b'memroi so amayraim. Normally, if the Gemara quotes a whole discussion between amayraim, and then we want to reintroduce a part of it. So that's where the Gemara uses gufa, we learned above, but not by a Mishnah, not by a Tana. So the Amar li Rebbe, this is Rashi. Rashi says, my teacher told me, Gavaldik Mishum, Dahach Mishnah min Taharais, since we are quoting a Mishnah in Uksin from the Seder of Taharais, She'ein mehem shum Gemara ba'olam. You don't have Talmud Bavli on Taharais. V'loi mifureshes, and it's not expounded nor explained as we have Gemara on the other Mishnayos and throughout Shas. Lefikach, says Rashi from his teacher, Noyeg Hashas Loimer Gufa Kedei Lefarish. We write Gufa because really we love learning Taras in Talmud Bavli in order to get an opportunity to write and to expound and to quote Gemaras, which are members of Amirayim on Mishnayos. So since the goal is to speak as much as we could on a Mishnah and Taras, so we're not just quoting the Mishnah, we're quoting the Mishnah Dafka in order to speak about the Amachlekas Amayraim here as to what the word Besasan means. So the Gemara writes the word Gufa. And now let's go back inside the Gemara. Taka, what is the meaning of Besasan? Literally, Besasan means it was broken open. So Rabbi Yechanan says Besasan Mamish. And that's what we learned above, that in order for it to lose the status of a yad, you have to do an action to it. You have to break it open. However, here we have the Girsa. Rabbi Elazar, the Amoira, says, no, that the Besasan only means hitir agodan. You untied their binding. So you bring all of these shafts, you bring all of these, you bring the tvua into the threshing floor. You know, they were bound in the fields. Before you thresh them, you untie them. And as we spoke out yesterday, that untying untying the sheaves, right? They don't actually affect a physical change in the stems themselves. It doesn't do that. Untying them at best is megale. It demonstrates that one doesn't need anything other than the kernels. You're taking already the pre-steps of getting rid of all of the waste, which is why we viewed this above, that if the word besasan only means untying its binding, that's not called a maisa in the wheat themselves. And now indeed, as the Gemara asks, like we learned above, that says besasan is hikded agodon. So you did not do a maisa, which is why we understand why the Tana Rabbi Yosi, Hainu the Matama Rabbi Yosi, he still considers them as yodos, even though your intention now is such that you no longer need anything other than the kernel. But since it already had the status of yodos, a machshava cannot be mavatal, cannot negate, cannot undo the status that was brought about prior to it. Only a maisa can undo its prior status. But Elul Rabbi Yechanan that says bisasan mamish, you mamish already crushed it. That means you already broke it open. So even if there is still some klipa around the kernels, but it's already different, you made a change in it. So taka mai matame Rabbi Yosi. So for that we learned Amar Rab Shimon ben Lakish hoyel v'ru'uis lo'ivcham be'eser, that when you are going to be turning them over with a pitchfork, and based off the kernels are very little, they might fall through the cracks. The thicker they are, then the more you will be able to manipulate them with the pitchfork. So the little bit of klipa that's still on them is beneficial. You want them to be there. You will actually be using it to grab it, to be able to turn it over. Okay, so now says the Gemara, now we have a shtickle like Adita. Now you saw that the word eser means a pitchfork. And interestingly, prayer sometimes in the Chumash is also called eser, as we have in Parshas Toldos, when both Rivka and Yitzchak were davening for them to get to have children, and the Torah says like Vayetar Yitzchak, and then Vayei Oser Loi, right? Hashem, right, allowed himself to be enticed by the prayers of Yitzchak. That was the whole chitas, Tzadik ben Tzadik, Tzadik ben Osha. So the Torah uses Tefilla b'loshen eser, Vayei Oser. And why is that? And Amar Rabbi Elazar, Lama nimshlot Tfilas and Shol Tzadikim ke'eser. Why is it called Why do we use the same word that also can mean a pitchfork? Just like a pitchfork on the threshing floor. It's used to turn over, tossing the kernels from one place to the other, and it's turning it on the other side. One of the powers that the Tefilla has, a side of the Ikr, which is to be connected to God, but it actually, it has the power to change the flow of godliness into the world. That prior to their prayer, it was coming midas achzariyos, it was coming through the midah of harshness. Here we're speaking about a midah of godliness, of kedusha, what we would generally call gevura, and through the prayer, it changes the flow. That from then onward, it should go into the world through the midah of rachmanis, of mercy, of compassion, like a pitchfork. It turns things around. Okay. Mishnah. We established the three criteria needed for schach to be kosher. Has to be something that's now not mechuber, not connected, but it has to be gidulei min haaretz, and that has to be in its current state, halachically something that is not even susceptible to becoming tamei. And therefore, like we mentioned in the introduction, that a board, no matter how wide the board is, it's wood, gedulim in haaretz, it's now a board, it's not mechuber, and it's flat woodware, pshutei klei is not makabel tuma. So theoretically, and midoiraisa, you would be allowed to cover your schach, to cover your sukkah with boards. And that's the way people would build homes then. I know then they would also add some plaster, but prior to the plaster, should put boards one next to the other on top of your schach, says the Mishnah, that indeed, we may cover our sukkah with boards, holds Rabbi Yehuda. Guys, this Mishnah has to be unpackaged in the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda is lenient. Rabbi Meir oiser. Oiser also connotes an derabanan. It's not as strong as psula as we had in the beginning of the whole Masechta and that base. And again, what width of board are they talking about? We'll leave for the Gemara. That has to be clarified. And then the next part of the Mishnah also has to be clarified. It's all connected together. If you don't understand the first part, clearly you won't get the second part. Let's read the words. Nasan Aliyah Neser, if you put on top of the sukkah, eschach, a board that is wide 4 tfachim. Now, is this subject to the machloikas of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir, or were they arguing by boards that were under 4 tfachim? But if it is 4 tfachim, everyone would agree that it's not kosher. We don't know yet. But let's read the words. If you cover the sukkah with a board that's wide 4 tfachim, the sukkah itself is not invalid. However, but you may not sleep underneath it. By the way, sleeping doesn't only mean sleeping. Sleeping means sleeping. Sleeping means eating. In other words, you can have a metzias where the sukkah per se is kosher, but that area in the sukkah will not be kosher. What are we talking about here? For this detail, we have to learn Rashi. We already spoke out the sugya in yesterday's shiur. So Rashi writes, what are we talking about? Says Rashi, first of all, the Neser Rachav Dalet. And Dalet means arba'ah. Any board that's wide 4 tfachim is going to be rabbinically pasul. Pasul, like the Gemara is going to say. And Rashi is telling us that according to Rav, it's only going to be pasul according to Rav Meir. According to Shmuel, a board that's 4 tfachim wide is going to be pasul midrabanan. According to everyone. And on this, the Mishnah is saying, yeah, the sukkah is kosher. Now, how can that be? So says Rashi, ukegoin, the last part of the Mishnah speaking about the Yohave Eitzel Hadoifen, that this board was placed near a wall. The schach pasul eina pasul minatzad ela bedalad amis. The omrinan doifen akuma. Guys, let's review what we learned yesterday. First of all, when we're speaking about sukkahs, we're speaking about a 3-walled sukkah. This is very important, this detail. If you have a 3-walled sukkah, we will learn this on Daf Yud Zayin and on Daf Yud Ches soon. If you have a gap of air, of nothing, no schach, that runs from the wall all the way to the front, to the doorway, separating the sukkahs, the rule is that if the opening is 3 tvachim or more, it does separate the sukkahs. the sukkahs will be invalid. Of course, you can't sit under the gap. The sukkahs are invalid because each side only has 2 walls. If you have schach, but in the center it's invalid schach, since at least there's something up there, so there we say 4 tvachim or more invalidate the sukkah. But there's some other rule we have to remember. What happens if you have invalid schach not going through the center, but mamish near a wall? Here, even if it's 4 tvachim, even if it's 8 tvachim, you can't invalidate the sukkah so quickly. Why? Because of the rule, halacha l'Moshe Sinai, that we view that invalid schach as part of the wall. The wall, which doesn't have to be kosher to schach, is bent over. So you're not losing a wall. But on the other hand, you can't eat under a wall. You can't use a wall for schach. That is the way we are understanding the last line in the Mishnah over here, that if you have take invalid schach, which is this midrabanan, a board that's 4 tefachim wide or wider. Now, whether this invalidation, you have to understand the pshat and the reisha, is l'kula alma, only according to Rav Meir, whatever that is. So even though it's on the side, and therefore it's part of the wall, doif and akuma, it will only invalidate the sukkah rabbinically if you have 4 amas of boards that are 4 tvachim wide, going from the wall into the sukkah, into the width of the sukkah, or more than 4 amas. But if it's less than 4 amas, doif and akuma, nevertheless, don't use that part of the sukkah. And the ikid is sleeping, don't sleep under it, which means don't sleep under it, nor don't eat under it, because you're not in the sukkah, you are under the wall, but not in, says the Gemara. Now let's understand exactly what is the machlokes, where is the machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda, who's the Mekel, and Rabbi Meir, who's the Machmer, in our Mishnah. Machlokes Rav and Shmuel. It's very simple. Omar Rav, machlokes of our Mishnah is only b'nesarim sheyesh v'hem arba'ah, when the width is 4 tvachim or more. That's a wide board. That Rav Meir Islay, Gzeiros Tikra, Rabbi Meir subscribes to the Gzeira of it resembles a roof. That's it. That's the whole daf today. What's Gzeiros Tikra? Zok Rashi. Rashi says that since it was common for people to roof their homes with boards of wood that were 4 tefachim wide, that was the standard. Today you call a 2x4. So it was a standard size board that was used to roof your homes. There's no doubt, says Rashi, that one may not use one's roof in the home for a sukkah. Because the fact that Torah tells us go into the sukkah, Hashem is excluding you living in your home. So as we learned, you don't have to put the schach l'shem mitzvah sukkah. We pass like Basilo, but the schach has to be a roof that was put for shade. If you have a structure that was not only built for shade, it was built for a house. A house is not a kosher to sukkah. Now, even though you built your sukkah outside, and you only are going to put it up for the 7-8 days for sukkahs, but since it looks like a typical roof in a home, that's the way they did construction. And I know in the home it's also plastered, and this is not plastered. That's not enough of a difference. The fact that this was the way people built the roofs in their homes, it looks like it, and that will be the reason for Rav Meir that say it resembles a roof. Midrabanan, it's not good. And Rabbi Yehuda, you're not eating in your home. You're not eating in your home. You place this for shade, or even better, most people built it for the mitzvah. They built it Matzah Yom Kippur. They built it for a sukkah. It resembles. I don't care. It meets the criteria of schach. Aval, continues Rav, who's the lenient one between Rav and Shmuel. If the nesarim, if the boards don't even have 4 tefachim of width, everyone holds that it's kosher. Since most people don't build in their homes a roof made out of boards that are narrower than 4 tefachim, so it doesn't resemble a roof. Or let me word it differently. It only resembles a minority of roofs. We don't care about that. We don't care about that. So says Rav. However, Shmuel is a lot more machmir. He says like this, that their argument is dafka when the boards don't have 4 tefachim. If a board has 4 tefachim, everyone will hold that it's pasul. Again, pasul midrabanan, pasul because of gezeiras tikra. And what Shmuel does is that he links our machlokes to the shas machlokes of Rabbi Meir against everyone else, whether we are chayshin and limauta or not, whether we take a minority into account or not. The majority of people then who built roofs used boards that were 4 tefachim wide. There are a minority of people that build roofs with less than 4 tvachim wide boards. Since Rabbi Meir is chayish l'meuta, so Gezeiras Tikra goes even if it's under 4. Gewaldig. But L'Kula Alma, everyone subscribes to the rabbinic invalidation of a board that resembles your standard roof material, even though it's not plastered. Important. But since you can't live in a house, you have to live in a sukkah, it looks too much like a house. Says the Gemara, hold on. Shmuel is saying that any board that's under 4 is a machlekes. Shmuel did not give a minimum limit. Guys, let's not forget, let's say we use bamboo sticks. Bamboo sticks is not 4. What is Rav Meir saying that any width is going to be a midrabanan invalid? That can't be. That's tam sticks, which is for sure l'kol alma good schach. Everyone uses that for schach. So Amar Rav Papa, what he clarifies is that Shmuel is placing their machlekes if it's in between 3 and 4. Less than 3 for sure is not a problem. That's what Shmuel is saying. Not like Rav. No, Shmuel says that if the boards are 4 tefachim wide or wider, everyone will hold both. Even Rabbi Yehuda, who's the makel, will hold that midrabanan it's psula, also because of Gezeiras Tikra. If the boards are not even 3 tvachim wide, because kanama almaninu keep pligi. Where do we have the machlokes? If the boards are in between 3 and 4, marsavar, this master goes to Rabbi Yehuda. Even the leisnu hu shiur makom, since they lack the size of a significant area. Significant area. 4 tvachim is a significant area. We just had this above. By Hilchas Shabbos, that's the 4 tvachim. Less than 4 tvachim is a makam tur. If it doesn't have that shiur, loy gozrina. Umar savar, that's Rabbi Meir. Kiven the nafkilu mitoyras lavud. It is considered significant. There is in halach in other areas some significance to 3 tvachim. Under 3 tvachim lavud, 3 tvachim or more, no lavud. So gozrina, and here is where Rashi 6 lines before the bottom adds Gozrin on the guys, the Gezeiras based on that Gezeiras Tikra. So Rashi writes the words that Taka, you're right that most people for their homes, for their roofs, use boards that are 4 tvachim, but Rav Meir is chayish l'miut. Sheyesh miut choisem tikra, even from boards that are under 4. Okay, so that's the 2 ways, the machlekes Rav and Shmuel, and we're going to try to prove one way or the other which one of these 2 Amayroim are right, beginning with our Mishnah. Says the Gemara, Tanach, we learned in our Mishnah. That's the end. That's the safe of the Mishnah. If you did place a board that is wide 4 tvachim, the Sukah remains kosher. Important, guys. Invalid schach 4 tvachim or more. We're going to learn later if it's placed in the center of the Sukah and it goes all the way across. That does divide a Sukah. If you only began with 3 walls, if you can just imagine that in your mind, and you place it from the wall all the way to the Pesach, you will de facto have 2 sukkahs, each one only having 2 walls. It will invalidate it. But if it's placed near any one of the side walls or any one of the 3 walls, as long as you are less than 4 amas from the doifen, we use the halacha l'Moshe Misinai doifen akuma to say that you're not losing that wall. It's take invalid schach, but it's considered wall. That's what the Mishnah is saying. But okay, it's wall. You can get it both ways. If it's a wall, don't sleep, don't eat underneath it. Now hold on. The Mishnah clearly spoke about a nesed, a board that's 4 tvachim. So says the Gemara, asks the Gemara, well, that's only good according to Shmuel. Shmuel, that said, the Amar the machlokes. But if a board has 4 tvachim or more, everyone holds that it's psula. Therefore, the seifa of the Mishnah will go according to everyone. It's gewaldige flow. When the Mishnah says lo yishan tachtov, the Mishnah doesn't say that lirav meir lo yishan tachtov. It's according to everyone. El lirav that says fakert b'sheyesh behen arba is the machlokes. If eben barba divi hakol ksheira. So hold on. So then what will come out? So lirav Yehuda amay lo yishan tachtov. And the Gemara says you're right. Rav never said, will not learn that the second clause in the Mishnah is l'kol alma. It actually goes good because the Mishnah first quotes Rabbi Yehuda, then the Mishnah quotes Rabbi Meir, and then the continuation will be a hemshech of Rabbi Meir. Now that Rabbi Meir says that a board that has 4 tvachim width is rabbinically invalid schach, so he says, listen, if you place it near a wall within Daladamas, you're not going to ruin the sukkah, you're not losing the wall, but it's invalid. So answers the Gemara, me savra divri hakoli. Rav is going to learn that the second clause on the Mishnah is divri hakol. No, Seifa will only go according to Rabbi Meir. Okay, weiter. Toshaman, we learned in a Braisa, Shnei Sadinim, 2 sheets. Now, guys, sheets invalidate a sukkah. Why is that? Guys, a sheet, I don't care what the sheet was made out of, aside of the fact that we just learned above, Rambam, that even if it's made out of linen, once it's completely processed, it looks so unlike flax. Let's go, sheet is makabel tuma. A sheet is not valid schach. Now, let's go back to the dinim that we are mentioning, that when you have invalid schach and you place them in the center of the sukkah, right, and it's going to separate the sukkah into 2, you have to have 4 tfachim width of invalid schach. Now, what happens if you have 2 sheets? Neither of them on their own have the width of 4 tfachim, but both of them together, not because they're sewn together, but they're placed together, they amount to 4 tfachim or more. So says the Braisa that Shnei Sadinim, they will be mitzdarif to what? To the shiur of 4 tfachim width, that if you place them in the center of the sukkah going all the way across, it separates, it divides, it doesn't allow the wall of one side to be counted for the schach on the other side. Both sides only have 2 walls, and it invalidates the sukkah. Daf Yud Daled Amud Beis. But if you have 2 boards, in contrast, which as we are learning in our Mishnah today, that boards are pasul midrabanan, here in mitzdarfin. Now, obviously, as Rashi points out, this Tanakama must be Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda is the one that's lenient, and he says they don't combine. Really, the way Rashi learns, we're gonna come back and address a nuance over here, because Rabbi Yehuda holds that you can put a board as chach. That's what Rabbi Yehuda said in the Mishnah. So it's a non-problem. So they don't combine to invalidate the sukkah. Now, really, there's a diuk over here. The diuk is that normally the word they don't combine implies that even though each one is invalid per se, but you don't combine. If it's a non-problem, then there's no problem to combine to begin with. But we'll leave that for later. However, Rabbi Meir Omer, this is all behemshach to our Mishnah. Rabbi Meir is the machmer. He says no, that nisarim, that boards are like sadinim, they are like sheets. And yes, they combine to invalidate the sukkah. Now we got a problem. Now we got a problem to Rav, and it's gavaldik. So the Gemara says, listen, Bishleim Shmuel, that says that only b'she'ein bohen arba'a is where you have the machlokes. But if a board has 4, everyone holds that it's pasul. So that it works. So my mitzdarfin, this is the Rav Meir. Mitzdarfin la'arba, the boards, each board doesn't have even 4. That is where Rabbi Yehuda says it's okay. That's why Rabbi Yehuda says that you can have the entirety of the sukkah covered with boards that are less than 4. It's ein mitzdarfin because it's schach that's kosher. Shmuel is going to hold that each one is pasul. Each one is pasul in Rameir. However, this din of when you have the width of 4, this concept, you invalidate the whole sukkah, like we just quoted, if it's going through the center. So since these boards are not good, when you put 2 of them together and they're placed in the entire length of the sukkah in the center, it's mitzdaref to the din that if you're mesachach your sukkah with good schach, but in the middle you have invalid schach, it separates the sukkah into 2. El Rav, that holds that even b'sheyesh behen arba zamachloikes, aval eimer ma'abod v'yakol ksheira. So what is the case of our Braisa? Hey chidami. If the Braisa is speaking about boards that are 4 tfachim, why would Shmuel say they are mitzdaref? You know what mitzdaref means? Again, mitzdaref means that now that you combine them, you got yourself a problem, even before you combine them. If every board is 4, and it must be that way, because according to Rav, according to Rabbi Meir, less than 4 b'chlal is not a problem. When you put bamboo sticks, l'kula almer, you're good. Of course, it doesn't combine. But if it's 4, why do we have to combine? That's the din. That's invalid schach. And if it doesn't have arba, why would Rav Meir be machmer? It's like putting out your schach with bamboo sticks. It's going to be fine. Even though when you add up the width of all of them together, you got the whole width of the sukkah. So what? Hakana ba'almaninu. So here again, we're going to go back to what we learned in the Mishnah, that our Rav says no. The Braisa, obviously, Rav, it must be speaking about boards that have 4 tfachim or more. Under 4 tfachim, according to Rav, is not problematic, not according to anyone. So why do we have to come to combination if 4 tfachim is that which invalidates and separates the sukkah into 2? Because this brisa is not speaking about where a person would lay the schach in the center of the sukkah. We're not focusing on the issue of you dividing your one sukkah into halachically 2 sukkahs, neither of them having 3 walls. No, we're speaking about you putting them near a wall, and you are saying, like we have in the sefer of our Mishnah, and because of the rule of doif and akuma, even if you have invalid schach, it doesn't yet invalidate the sukkah. You still get to use the wall of that side, but there's a limit to that as well. What happens if you hit the 4 amas by using these boards of 4? Umay mitzdarfen. This is l'ramei. Mitzdarfen la'arba amos min atzad. Mamish perfect. And here again, so the Tanakama and the Bryce is Rabbi Yehuda. Tanakama holds that boards that are 4 are b'chlal not problematic. You can put a whole sukkah with boards of 4 tfachim. That's what he means by a mitzdarfen. Rabbi Meir says it is mitzdaref, like sadinim. Mitzdaref for what? Not to separate a sukkah into 2. For that you don't need it. Starfus to remove you from the din of doif and akuma. Another version of how this Bryce was used to challenge the machlekes Rav and Shmuel. And it was worded like this: Bishleim according to Shmuel, the Amar. That what Bishein Bohen Arba Amachloikes Avol Yesh Behem Arba Divrei Hakol Psula. So my mitzdarfin, you know what he means? He means mitzdarfin la arba amois min atzad. Wow. And what we're trying to say over here is, look inside the Rashi, 11 lines from the top, that the minatzad ain't schach poisel elo b'daladams, like we keep on saying. The bebatzim hachi gemiri, we have the halacha l'moshe misinai of doif and akuma. And v'ka'amar Rabbi Yehuda, that's the chiddush according to this lishna achrina, that if you have shnei nisarim shel arba'a, guys, this is all according to Shmuel. And according to Shmuel, everyone agrees that 4 amas is possible. Everyone agrees that it's possible. So l'chayra, even Rabbi Yehuda should be mitzdarefit. That will be a big chiddush. Nevertheless, ein mitzdarfin. Sha'af kula roya l'sachech bohem. Why? Because that's the whole chiddush of Shmuel, that they only argue the leis leg gzeiras tikr. That Rabbi Yehuda holds, listen, that nesarim of 4 tfachim and 4 tfachim that you put near the wall, ein mitzdarfin. Because he minimizes, he limits the gezeiras tikra. And Avmeir says that Yemet Starfa. However, back in the Gemara, but according to Rav, what does Rav hold? Chevre, Rav holds that your machloikis is when it's 4 tfachim wide. By four wide, that's where Rabbi Meir says he asks, and Rabbi Yehuda holds it's b'chlal not a problem. So Meir, now the question will be, according to Rabbi Meir, I understand that my mitzdarfin, we must be speaking about, according to Rav, we must be speaking about boards that are 4 tfachim wide to begin with. And Rav Meir Asir, so why do you have to combine it like we learned above? We are combining it to take you away from the doif and akuma, because that's already 4 amas. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Yehuda, there is no gezeiras tikra. According to Rabbi Yehuda, there is no gezeiras tikra at all. Everything is okay. Under 4 is okay, l'kula alma. Even 4 or more is okay according to Rabbi Yehuda. The word mitzdaref, that's the key. The word mitzdaref implies that you have a problematic schach, but it's not that problematic, so you don't combine one with the other. According to Rabbi Yehuda, there is no problem to begin with. The word mitzdaref is the wrong word. My aim mitzdarfin. Kanem ba'almu. And the Gemara answers, you're right, that really, if all this Braisa would have been doing is to record the Shita of Rebbe Yehuda, the Braisa would not have used the words mitzdaref. Since we are recording Shitas Rabbi Meir, and Rabbi Meir, he subscribes to Gezeras Tikra when the boards have 4 Tfachim, and Rabbi Meir is adding that if you put them in Atzad, you combine them, if they are 4 amas or more, so you no longer even have a wall. So just to be symmetric, since you use the word mitzdarfen Rabbi Meir, so therefore Rabbi Yehuda uses the words ein mitzdarfen, even though really, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's more than just ein mitzdarfen. It's not problematic because there is no gzeras tikra b'chlal according to Rav, according to Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so we did not refute either of these Amirayim, and actually the Gemara is going to say that already in the times of the Tanoim, already in the prior era, there was a misunderstanding, there was a debate, there was a machlokes as to what is the machlokes Ramein and Rabbi Yehuda. And Tanya Kavase de Rav and Tanya Kavase de Shmuel, and here it's clear. Tanya Kavase de Rav, and this Bryce is quoting Ramein and Rabbi Yehuda, Sichacha bin Esarim Shel Erez, if a person covered his sukkah, again, boards, that's the whole topic of today. With boards, here the example is of cedar. It doesn't have to be of cedar. If she'ein bahem arba'ah, if the width of every board is under 4 tfachim, clear. Divrei hakol kshedim. Yesh bahem arba'ah. So there is a machloikes tanoim whether we subscribe to Gezeras Tikra. Rab Meir Poisel, Gezeras Tikra, that's midrabanan, guys. And Rabbi Yehuda B'chlal, not a problem. Means according to this Braisa, like Rav, Rabbi Yehuda B'chlal has no problem with boards for schach. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, this is the Tanach. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, he's trying to prove that he's correct. That Maisa, he remembers that there was a B'shas HaSakana. There was a time Sakana, and this tragically, there were many times that various governments, they banned Jews to observe the mitzvahs. And in many cases, we were penalized almost with death. And yeah, normally we don't want for our sukkah to look like our home. But if you have to hide the mitzvah, Sheheviyanu, we brought boards, Shahayu Bahen Arba'a, he writes clearly, those boards had 4 tvachim, they brought 4 tvachim because when people built homes, that was the standard building material for roofs. And they wanted to build a sukkah in a way where the non-Jews, the government would not notice that we're living in a sukkah. And v'sichachnu al gaber marpeses, we covered a porch. Keilu, we're extending the home. And v'yoshavnu tachteim during the holiday of Sukkot. And there was no problem. So Amru Loi, this is not even Rabbi Meir. This is the Chevra told Rabbi Yehuda that's a raya. Misham raya, ein shas hasakona raya. Shas, guys, it's very simple. Rabbinic bans are lifted at times of religious persecution. It has to be that way. Because what will be the alternative? Guys, one doesn't have to be Yaharik Val Yavor for sitting in a sukkah, right? We had the sugya in Yuma just recently. It's only for the big 3 sins. So, of course, if there's a sukkah that's kosher biblically, it's only invalid rabbinically, at least use that during the times of persecution. It's more than that. We say that the rabbinic bans to beginning are lifted. But if not, b'shas hasakana, then no one would have allowed using a sukkah that's covered with boards of 4 tfachim. You have no proof. Bottom line is, you see clearly that their whole machloikis is by 4. Under 4, divrei hakol kshedim. However, Tanya Kavasa de Shmuel, another version, already from the era of the Tanoim. Clearly also, it's clear. Again, the same example is by boards. If there are 4 tfachim, if these boards have 4 tfachim with or more, divrei hakoil psula. Everyone subscribes to this rabbinic gezeras tikra. Where is there the machlokes? Ein be'em arba'ah. If it doesn't have 4 tfachim of width, and it is over here that Rabbi Meir still passes, like we learned that Rashi learns, because still gezeras tikra, that's the way Rashi words it, because a minority of people would build the roofs with boards that are not 4 tfachim wide. Chayish l'miyuta, Rav Meir l'shitase. Rabbi Yehuda is machshir. Now, another nuance, and guys, this nuance will be better expounded on Daf Yud Ches, but let's begin mentioning it right now. Umoy de Rabbi Meir, guys, Rabbi Meir is the one that's machmir here. She'im yesh bein neser leneser, if you have in between each board, kimeloi neser, equal space equal space, that then shemaniach psal b'neihem, as long as you insert, psal means valid schach, in between the boards that are invalidating the sukkah. You don't have more, it sounds like you don't have more invalid schach than valid schach, but we're going to clarify that's not the key over here. Then the sukkah is going to be kosher. Now we're going to quote the statement, and there's a lot of challenges on the statement. I know if you have a picture, you can put the picture up. What the Gemara will clearly say on Daf Yud Ches is that what we need here is for the invalid boards to be under 4 amas from each wall. Really what Rav Meir means to say is that even when you are using boards which are invalid, and here, this is Lashitas Shmuel, this Braisa that we're quoting Shmuel, that no matter what the size is, if it's 4, it's invalid. Even if the boards are under 4 Tvachim, L'Rabbi Meir, it's invalid. So we're speaking about invalid schach. That's a great picture. Invalid schach is not good, but as long as the invalid schach from the wall doesn't go 4 amas, it's less than 4 amas, we can view all of that part as the doifen akuma. And what the Braisa really means to say over here, and that's the picture, that you had a board mamish touching the wall. The beginning of the sukkah, if you're going from the width, is an invalid piece of schach. And you're leaving, so let's say we're speaking about 4 tvachim, because Rav Meir doesn't make a difference. It's even Rav Yehuda, it's invalid. So you have 4, and then you have 4 of proper schach. 4 and 4. The key is that all of that area is under 4 amas. It's viewed as doifen akuma. Now, as long as you are starting out with the sukkah, as we'll see on Daf Yud Ches, that's 48 tvachim wide, you're going to cheshbon, and you're going to see that if you have boards psal, from both sides, the center is still going to be a center of 8 tvachim of valid schach. And that's amazing. Why is that amazing? Because the minimum size sukkah is a sukkah that's 7 by 7. And even though that in this example it's 8, you don't even need the 8, you only need 7. The point that Rav Meir is making is that we can use doifen akuma from both sides. As long as you have 7 tvachim or more, in our case it's 8 tvachim, of valid schach in the center of the sukkah, well, it has 3 walls. It's perfect. It has the wall on the back. It has, because of doifen akuma, the wall of the right, the wall of the left. True, again, don't eat, sleep under the doifen akuma, but the sukkah in the center is going to be kosher. That's what he means, guys. We're going to revisit this, God willing, on Daf Yud Ches. Furthermore, Rabbi Yehuda, she'im nasan elel nesa shurach alar bat tvachim, on the side, even though Rabbi Yehuda, this Bryce is saying that even Rabbi Yehuda, who's the lenient, is going to be machmer by 4, Rabbi Yehuda also subscribes to doifen akuma. It's gemira, it's halacha l'Moshe Messinai. So it's 4, but it's by near the side walls, and there isn't a protrusion. It doesn't go 4 amas away from the wall. It's under 4 amas from the wall, so it's going to be kosher. Doifen akuma. But that was the end of our Mishnah also. The ein yishenim tachtov, you're not allowed to sleep underneath it, which also means you can't eat underneath it. And v'hayoshin tachtov lo yotza yedei choy vasoim. All right. Now that's that. That was simple.
So according to Rabbi Yehuda, what is the use of the sukkah then if he can't eat or sleep under it?
Because tzvika, it's not going 4 amas or more from the wall. We're speaking about a sukkah that has more space. So once you finished laying these boards, you put psal, kosher schach, and you are allowed to eat and sleep under the kosher schach.
Just not under the boards itself.
That's right. Okay. Now, Chavra, whatever the dimension of a board that becomes invalidated, today's daf, Yud Daled, because of Gzeiras Tikra, however much you want to learn, what happens if you have such a board? So let's say you have a board that's 4 amas wide, but you didn't place them on their stomach. You didn't place them where it's taking up 4 amas. You put them to their side. It's laying in its height, which is substantially less. It's less than 3 tvachim. You put it in a way where it's not a very good picture. It should not be a problem. And you're using this as chach. Is it problematic or not? Guys, let's not forget that normally when you have a rabbinic invalidation, normally we don't say that because of a rabbinic invalidation, it becomes intrinsically invalid. No. Fakir b'shas sakana, you can actually be in there. You would argue that, okay, now, it's a rabbinic issue. It doesn't look like it. Guys, no one built roofs of their homes when the boards were placed to the side the way you have it on the picture. So you can say, no, the gzeiras tikra should not be applicable in this scenario. Says the Gemara, machloikes amoyroim, whether it's going to be valid or not. Itmar was stated, hafachem al tzideim, if you turn these boards, again, like we said, no matter whatever the width is, a width that is problematic, but you didn't lay it on its width. You turned it on the side, machloikes. Rav Hunan says the halacha is machmer. He says it's psulam, but on the other side, Rav Chizda and Rav Huna, they say that it's kosher. And like Rashi writes, Rashi explains the reason why it's kosher. Rashi writes 21 lines before the bottom of the Amid that time mishum gezeiras tikra. It's not a biblical invalidation. It's only midrabanan, and it's because of it looks like it's just you're living in a home. Well, the people do not build their roofs with the boards on their roof turned on their sides, so it's removed from gezeiras tikra. Now, actually, we have to explain the shita of Rav Huna. And the way it's explained is by a story. And this story has a huge message in it. And let's read the story. Ikla, once Rav Nachman came to Surah. And obviously, between Rav Huna and Rav Chizda, Rav Bar Rav Huna, they consider that Rav Nachman the authority. And his opinion weighs on their psak din. So when Rav Nachman came to Surah, so ul ligabei Rav Chizda v'Rabba bar Rav Huna, and they were arguing with Rav Huna, and they were the ones that were lenient, and they felt they had a reason. So they wanted to hear from Rav Nachman that they're right, and they asked him. Amrulay, they asked Rav Nachman, hafachim al tzidem, if you have boards, let's go four tefachim, and you turn them to the sides. Mahu. So Amar Lahu, Rav Nachman says psula. Rav Nachman paskin like Rav Huna, and Rav Nachman gave a reason. See, Rav Huna never gave us reason. Rav Nachman gave up psak din b'tamin. The Alter Rebbe wrote a Shulchan Aruch milsa b'tamin. The original Shulchan Aruch doesn't write reasons. The Tur does, but not son. That's here. He says why. He said that since the Chachamim invalidated such boards for schach, the way you view a rabbinic isur on schach is by saying they rendered the schach inherently invalid. I know the reason was only because of gzeiras tikra. And you're right, no one makes a tikra then by laying these beams. Chaval, you're wasting wood. No one laid them on the side. But once they assered such boards, na'asu kishapudim shomatechas, they become like iron spits. Guys, iron cannot be used. Iron is makabel tuma. Iron is makabel tuma. Iron is not gedulim in haaretz. I'm saying iron is not a valid, iron is intrinsically unfit. So they came back to Rav Huna. And Amar Lahu Rav Huna then told this to Chaverim, did I not tell you that he will say like I did? I knew he's going to paskin like me. But they tell Rav Huna, Amru lei umi amar lon mar taimei v'loi kablinan minei. If you would have told us this, we would have accepted it from you. You never gave us a reason. You just said that it's not valid. If you would have used the words of Rav Nachman that once the Chachamim said these boards are invalid, that's the koyach of the Chachamim that they rendered the schach intrinsically invalid, we would accept it from you. So Amar Lahu, so Rav Huna tells Rav Chizda Naba bar Rav Huna, Umi bo isumi noi taimi, did you ever ask me for my reason and I did not tell you? Guys, this is very significant. In other words, what is the achrayis on the shoyel and what's the achrayis of the meishiv? Rav Huna felt he was asked the shayla, he gave the psak din. They were saying, if you would have told us the reason, we would not have even argued with you. And Rav Huna says, you should have asked me for my reason. It's on you to ask me. I don't have to go and offer information if you didn't ask. Let's move on. It's late, but this is a very significant discussion. How much does the Rav have to give a reason? How much is it on the person who's asking to ask of the Rav the reason for his psak din? Bottom line is, is that now that Rav Nachman sided with Rav Huna, Taka, we paskin like Rav Huna. Let's go right. And now, Lema Misayele, perhaps we'll find even a Tana that agrees with Rav Huna, with Rav Nachman. It says in a Braiso that if a sukkah does not have the minimum dimensions, it's not 7 by 7, or it has the minimum dimensions, but the wall does not go all the way down to the ground. And even though theoretically, we didn't speak about it yet a lot, the concept of good, achis, not asik. Theoretically, write a partition, if it's 10 tvachim tall, will also halacha l'moshe go down. But if you remember, we only use that practically when it comes to water by Eidovim. Remember, Danny, but we don't use it by a sukkah. Because even though there is if a wall doesn't go under the 3 tfachim, if you can't use lavud, you can't use by a sukkah, the theoretical good nachis, because since goats, physically, they are able to go under the gap in a partition. If it's 3 tfachim or higher off the ground, the movement of animals back and forth breaks the halachic good nachas. So oishin if it's over pirza, but if there is a under the wall, there is a breach. Now 3 tfachim is not your greatest height for animals to comfortably go over. It doesn't matter. They can force themselves through. We're going to learn a lot more about this later. The ikir from this braisa is the third statement. Or if they placed on the sukkah schach, that is a board that's 4 tfachim wide. Even if de facto what's on top of the sukkah, only 3 tfachim. How is that even possible? If it's a 4 tefach wide board, how is it possible that only 3 tfachim are over the sukkah? And the Havamina is, it's because you flipped it on the side. And the Braisa says, Psula. And we're only focusing on the third case. And indeed, hey, Chidami, how is that possible? If the board is 4 tvachim, when you place it on the roof, it should take up 4 tvachim. L'chora, is it not? Lav, kigoin shafachim al tzideyim. And the Braisa says it's possible. And that will substantiate even more Rav Huna. And by the way, be paskin like Rav Huna. But this Braisa is not a raya. Because maybe the case of the Braisa, you didn't turn the board on its side. The board is laying flat. The board is 4 tfachim wide. The case is different. You put the board at the edge of the sukkah, and the sukkah was only lacking 3 tfachim of schach. So you lay the board down. 3 of its 4 tefach wide was taka covering underneath the sukkah inside the walls. But because of you putting it mamash at the edge, it went over, like you have in the picture, went over the walls of the sukkah. Only the aisle to Los Gav, only 3 were inside, but the apik chad labar. Oh, so says the Braisa Psula. You know why it's puzzle? We already quoted this once in Nashi. That's another sugya we're going to learn more. There's a rule called Psal Hayotzim and Asukah Kesukah. Guys, there's always exceptions, but that's the rule. If you have a properly walled sukkah, minimum width, minimum length, minimum height, not beyond the maximum height. And you have schach, good schach. But the schach isn't only covering that which is under or inside the walls. The schach is going, like in our case, the schach is going over the walls to the outside. You are allowed to eat under the outside. Once the schach is rendered kosher schach, you can even eat there. That's what the Braisa is saying. That even though only 3 tvachim are in the sukkah, but since the other tefach that's going out is valid schach, so you got yourself a valid, theoretically valid 4-board schach. Well, that's the Gezeiras Tikra. Says the Gemara, since the Habalei Psal Ayitzim in Asukah, that's why we don't say it's only 3 tvachim. No, it's 4 tvachim. Because for Chol, Psal is a word for schach. Ayitzim in Asukah, Nidain, Kisukah, Gevaldik, Chavra, to be continued.
Yeah. In that case, why is it considered valid schach, Rabbi? Isn't the board...
No, that's why it's not valid schach. That's why, the Braisa says psula because you have a 4 board, you have a 4 tefach board. That's why it's psula. Maybe the Braisa would hold that if you put it al sideim, it's going to be kosher. Here it's not, and here it's...
Or if the board was 3 tfachim, then you would be able to eat outside, correct?
If the board is 3, if we're going to go, if we're going to go like Rav, then for sure, if we're going to go like Shmuel, if the board was 3 tfachim, the whole board was 3 tfachim, that's the machlokes Rav Meir and Rav Yehuda.
Thank you.
Wait, can you or can you not use 2x4s?
This is 4 inches. What's the 2x4? It's inches, right?
Right, which is under the 4 tavachim, and you can use it on the side, and it's
We don't use things on the side. You know, let's it's 7 o'clock. We're going to speak more about construction material, what people do right now, and we're going to speak more